Thank you very much, Vice Chair Maloney. Ms. Bateman, I'd like to start with you, if we could. As I mentioned in my opening statement, the Census Bureau is really good at collecting a lot of information, but none of the Census Bureau surveys that I'm aware of has any measures for things like loneliness, happiness, the availability of sources of emotional support, nor do they, to my knowledge, have any information on the availability of public amenities, access to public parks, playgrounds, libraries, and so forth. And those are things that are often at least associated with high levels of community involvement. So first, do you believe that the addition of survey questions addressing some of these topics could help researchers better understand the health of civil society?
They could provide insight as long as people understand the concepts. I think there would have to be some explanation of what you're looking for. And I know that this is a topic that's coming up all over the globe, so you could probably find existing formats and surveys that could help provide guidance, but it would be an interesting thing to look into.
Right. It's certainly, even though it's difficult to measure, it's certainly not impossible to measure, right? There are ways you could devise questions that could at least allow us to get access to some of this information.
Other countries are definitely looking into this. So.
Are there any other topics that you would suggest trying to address in order to assess the health of our civic institutions or the health of civil society?
That's a big question. I think if you could have a survey that people felt safe and they trusted the institution in the first place to respond, you could extrapolate and add more questions touching on that type of topic, but it would require trust in the institution.
Yeah, sure. They've got to have trust in the institution. If they don't trust it, then you're not going to get as much of a response. But high response rates alone, if you're not asking the right data, won't give you that. It gives me some comfort to know that in other parts of the world, they track such information. So we know it's not impossible. We also know that it is desirable and that there are good things that could come from it. Sometimes we fail adequately to appreciate the impact our laws might have on relationships, on what brings people together as families, as neighborhoods, as communities, as fellow congregants, and so forth. Mr. Aberstadt, I'd like to ask you a couple questions if I could. We've found a limited number of relevant survey questions that deal with social capital. As we've undertaken the Social Capital Project through the Joint Economic Committee, we've looked high and low for this. We haven't found a whole lot of it, and I think much of your work touches on things that are related to this. A web of relationships that connect people together that we have at the family level, at the community level, represent really, I think, what are people's best chances of succeeding in life, especially their best chances of thriving. What, if anything, would you recommend to be added to the Census Bureau surveys in order to give us a more accurate and fulsome view of associational life in America? Hit your red button if you
Senator, first and foremost, a salute to you and your committee for investigating this important question of social capital. I think your team has done great work, very promising work so far. I can mention one item in particular, which I believe you are currently prohibited from inquiring about, and this is the religious adherence or religious devotion of American citizens. Since 1976, the Census Bureau has been prohibited from asking such questions, and that has been taken, I think, broadly as best practice by all other statistical organizations. Since secular approaches and religiosity seem to have some bearing upon social capital, this would, I think, be a reasonable and maybe a very interesting question to include.
Thank you. Along with that, what do you think we ought to be asking about in terms of people's criminal records? The fact that, as much of your research indicates, there is a high connection between someone's criminal background, whether they've been on probation, parole, supervised release, or served time in prison, or all the above. Should we be asking more about that? And what could that tell us?
Sir, I think the most expeditious and inexpensive way of casting light in this area would be to link up existing administrative data with something like the current population survey, the monthly job report data. This could be done by the Census Bureau and other statistical U.S. authorities, paying attention to confidentiality and privacy of the individuals in question. This would be able to show, at least for a start, what sorts of patterns we see in the sentenced population currently on probation or on parole with respect to employment, income, family situation, and the CPS questions. It would probably take about 3 weeks to get information on those 5 or 6 million persons. Questions for the ACS, I think, would have to be tested very carefully and prepared very carefully, since this is such a sensitive and personal area of life. But if they could be adequately tested and rolled out, I think this would help to illuminate this darkness I was describing.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you, Vice Chair Maloney.